Welcome to the Superhumanize Podcast. I'm your host, Ariana Summer, and I am so deeply honored to have you with me today for a conversation that is close to the very core of what it means to be human. My guest is Dr. Hsien Seow, Canada Research Chair in Palliative Care and Health System Innovation, professor at McMaster University, and one of the foremost voices reimagining how we approach serious illness and end-of-life care. His work transcends the medical system, inviting us to see palliative care not as surrender, but as a path to reclaiming agency, dignity, and meaning, even and perhaps especially in life's most vulnerable chapters. Dr. Seow's book, Hope for the Best, Plan for the Rest, co-authored with Dr. Samantha Winemaker, is a guide to navigating life-changing diagnoses with clarity, courage, and grace. It offers 7 keys to transform the illness journey from one of fear and disempowerment to one of hope and preparedness. In today's conversation, we explore the paradigm shifts needed in healthcare, the deeper truths mortality can teach us about life, and how we can each become active architects of our own experience, even when the path ahead feels out of our control. This episode is about much more than palliative care. It's about what it means to live fully awake to our finite nature and to love, decide, and be present with the preciousness of this human life.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.
Hsien, welcome to the show. I am so glad you made time today to spend time with us.
Oh, I'm so honored to be on your podcast, Ariana.
Oh, absolutely. The honor is mine. I am so deeply moved by your mission to transform palliative care from something that's often shrouded in fear into a pathway of dignity, of agency, and also of hope. And before we dive in, Hsien, could you share what first called you to devote your life, your career to this work, and maybe also share some experiences or awakenings that shaped your view on how we care for those with life-limiting illnesses?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You may be able to see it in my picture here, but that's a picture of my mom in the corner. And my mom her name was Swatine, which means snow pearl. And she was the center of our family. She was incredibly loving and kind, and everybody wanted to be her friend. And everyone was just very generous and loving, and just one of the greatest people I've ever met. And when she got breast cancer, it devastated our entire family. We were suddenly very focused on the cure and focused on the medical world, which was very foreign to us at that time. And I have an older brother, and it was just me, my dad, my brother, my mom. And it was a very long journey, several years of ups and downs, and I think very typical. The thing is, I was only 6 years old when she was first diagnosed, and she died when I was 10. And I can tell you, in that 4 years, we really didn't know what to expect that entire time. We were just being led along, living day to day in a way, and just holding on to hope. And when it ended, I actually thought I would become a medical doctor, become an oncologist, and maybe find a cure for cancer, and maybe biohack a way that we don't ever have to deal with cancer. But over time, I think in college, I realized the awakening moment came when I realized I was in a room full of medical students, and I wasn't a medical student, but I was in a class with one. They were talking about hospice. And when the presenter talked about who knows what hospice is, I raised my hand and nobody else did. And I realized these medical students who were going to become surgeons and leaders of hospitals didn't really have an appreciation of that dying was a part of living. And so that got me into this idea of how we plan for almost every other aspect of our lives, not just medical, airplanes and our groceries and things like that, and gas stations, but we don't plan for not our death, but the dying process, which is natural. So I think if I was paying attention to my life, I could just see that this was something that I just knew that how we organize our systems and our communities was a big piece of how our outcomes would be. And so that's how I got into this field.
Thank you, Hsien, for sharing this deeply personal and also very moving story. I can't even begin to imagine how that must have felt and impacted you at just 6 years old. And in that sense, also, what a beautiful legacy your mother has left by the legacy you're building. And it really crossed my mind when I did a dive into your work, how many people still think of palliative care as giving up or only being relevant in the final days of the life of someone. And your work actually reframes this completely. Can you share with us what true palliative care really encompasses and why introducing it earlier can radically shift the quality of life and also the choices for patients and their families?
Yeah. So first I want to just tell you, palliative care to me is just the best care possible for a patient facing an illness. The approach and the ethos of palliative care came from people who were dying, but it's really an approach to care that looks at the whole person and their family, and not just the physical, but the spiritual, the psychological, the social, emotional. These are all part of who we are as people. So it has really focuses not just on the medical, but on the social part. And even though I explain all this in our research, and there's lots of researchers like myself who do that kind of work, I think it's still confusing because the reality is people meet somebody who has that label, palliative care or hospice, usually very late in their journey. So the average amount of time that someone uses hospice care is in the order of a couple weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 21 days in the US. And it's very similar in Canada and elsewhere. So it's not because people aren't well-intentioned. It's just we're positioned at the end because that is the business. That is the way the system puts us. But at the end of the day, palliative care is really just helping people live the best they can for as long as they can with their illness. And if we reframe it like that, I think that's what people actually want. We took a long time to try to I will use the word educate, to try to educate people about what palliative care is, redefining it or sharing the definitions and writing academic papers. But at the end of the day, there was a disconnect with what everyday people experience and feel and think. And it is much easier to go back to the heart of what is it that we're trying to do rather than teach from our point of view in a way. It was coming from a very academic or medical point of view, and that was missing the mark. And so it took us quite a long time. My partner in crime, so to speak, Dr. Sammy Winemaker, and she's a palliative care physician, and I'm a researcher. And we spent a long time trying to find the right words that would resonate with people. And you know how language is so important because how we frame things really sets up the whole mental model of what we're trying to do. And so we realized that when we said palliative care, or that the research was showing that early integration of palliative care had benefits, people heard us saying we were giving up early. And so they didn't want that. And so we had to really think about what is it that we were offering that they did want. And they wanted hope. And so what palliative care approaches, or helping people live the best they can for as long as they can, is really about balancing hoping for the best and planning for the rest. And it's walking two roads. And people who are really skilled clinicians are actually always balancing between these two things, even for illnesses that can be cured.
Yes, CNN, I found the title of Sammy's in your book also so striking. Hope for the best, plan for the rest. And you write about how hope and realism can coexist. And that in a world where doctors often fear taking away hope by sharing full truths. And how can patients and also the families reclaim both the courage for realism as well as the tenderness and also power of hope without feeling that they need to choose between them?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think what we have come to realize is taking one small step back is that I think we've set it up so that there's such a big power differential between when you get labeled a patient or labeled a caregiver and the medical system. And part of this is the recognition that we can flatten that power imbalance and reclaim some of this experience and journey and recognize that you have a huge role in the experience and the journey and the outcomes. And yes, there are some things that are going to be dictated by the biological parts of the disease or access to medicine and where we are with science. But there are other parts that we have always, are how we live our lives, how we choose to spend our time, the choices we make, the relationships that we want to invest in. That has a huge experience. And so the whole part of this is recognizing that actually you can be activated and there is agency and power that you can reclaim so that you can have what we call an in the know experience versus an in the dark experience. And when we give up that power to the medical system, what we're really doing is giving up our agency and our voice. And what happens over time is that just becomes more and more pressure of I'm losing myself. I'm losing what's important to me. And so I think when we think about it this way, patients and families are actually like, no, I definitely want to retain who I am. I want the choices we make to reflect things that are important to me. We do that in every other aspect of our life. And so I think when we realize what we can help people do is realize information that maybe doctors have or nurses have, but other people have, can help us to know what to expect so we can plan accordingly. And that is not about giving up hope or planning. That's just about the information exists. And if you're ready for it, it can help you if you want it.
Yes, it helps you reclaim agency. And the information is so important to re-empower you. And in your book, you actually outline powerful questions patients and families should ask early in their illness journey. Could you walk us through some of these and also share why they're so essential for regaining agency and dignity?
Yeah. In our book, we realized there were 7 keys that help people have a better illness experience. And what people have said is it activated them, it empowered them, and it was like a roadmap for how to journey through their illness right from the beginning. And we talked about the first one, which is the ability to walk 2 roads. And that's hoping for the best and planning for the rest. But the other biggest key and question is about the big picture of your illness. And we call the skill to get the big picture zooming out. It's so easy to get sucked in to the details, the medical tests, the numbers of what people are, all those things that they're doing to you. But we lose sight of the storyline of where we're at. And I think people are very scared maybe of the timeline, recognizing that if time is short, that's a scary thought. But if we knew what the story was, that there was a beginning, middle, late, and end stage for every illness, there was this pattern, knowing what the patterns to look for is so powerful. It's very similar to going through adolescence, those teenagers of what the phases would be. It's helpful to just know what to expect so that you can plan, or menopause, or any kind of natural thing that happens to us as humans. Those stages help us to plan so that A, we're ready, but B, we're not surprised. And we can, get ourselves ready so we can make the best of that experience. So zooming out and asking what is the pattern? What stage am I at? And what can I expect in this stage? What should I prepare for? That's not about giving up, actually. That's about living your best life. And so it's a very fine line. But when we hone in on the value proposition, I'll use that word, or what it was that we are really offering without stripping away the medical part, it became very powerful to patients and families as a way to get information that made them feel like themselves.
Yes, Hsien, and what a difference from just sticking our heads into the sand and trying to ignore and suppress because we're afraid. You also speak about moving from passive patienthood to being activated, an advocate and a co-creator of one's own care experience. What shifts of mindset or belief do you see as most catalytic for patients in this process?
Yeah, it's also one of our keys. We tell people to not assume that no news is good news. That often happens. People don't want to be difficult patients. They don't want to rock the boat. They feel like if they speak up too loudly, won't get as good care. But actually bringing your voice forward and in a respectful way, in a respectfully assertive way, can actually open up and give clarity to the medical team about where you want to go, and your community and your family. So we call that skill invite yourself. And what we're really saying is don't wait to be invited to the conversation. Bring up questions that you're thinking about. And in a way, you will be role modeling how you want others to follow in your footsteps. It happens so often that the family and others are tiptoeing around. They're trying to stay positive and they don't want to, they feel like talking about the future is sad. But actually, time is our most precious asset. And it's about maximizing the time that we have and living it as fully in the ways that we want and talking about how we want to spend that time. So that is the precious gift that we have. And that's what it unites all of us in a way. And so inviting yourself is the way to bring your voice forward and in a way train your doctors, if you want to say it like that. You're giving them permission to talk about these big topics because they know you've broached it and they're not worried that you didn't want to talk about it.
That is hugely important. And with regard to what you just brought up with family, loved ones often being very hesitant to talk about the future. Can you share from what you may have witnessed how it actually changed? There's a change for the better, for the positive, when the loved ones actually do start talking about the future, and in what way can they best do so to serve the journey of the person who is at that threshold of their lives?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. It connects to two of these keys that we talk about. One is we talk about the ripple effects, that if we think of dropping a stone in a lake and the ripples come out, if a patient with an illness, a person with an illness is at the center, there's the star, the center of attention. But there's a ripple effect and other people are affected. And it's oftentimes families who have to carry the burden and they're absolutely affected. And we always say they count too. And so we implore anyone who's affected to get as much information as possible because you're in this together. We understand that in the palliative care approach, that it's not just the patient and their family and really their community that are coming forward, and they all need support. And the more information between the person with the illness and their quote unquote family, their chosen family, the better outcomes that they'll have because fewer things will fall through the cracks and they'll be supported. Because again, 95% of the care is provided by the family and the community. Only 5% of the formal care is provided by, say, the hospital, formal medical system. So it really is a community and family event, a social event. This, not just the death, but the dying, the years of progressive illness is a social event. And so we just say, look, are you in the chosen family? Are you in the inner crew? What's your role? Declare that and make sure what you're signing up for, and maybe make sure you're being supported. And the more information you have, the more equipped you'll be to manage that role. And the other part of your question was, what is the effect once patients and families have this conversation about how they want to walk two roads and the recognition that there is a progression, but I'm not giving up. I'm still here. And this is how we want to make the best of our time. It's such a relief. You can see the relief come because actually a lot of the stress, I'll use the word stress, but sometimes it manifests itself as pain in all parts of their body, is the anxiety of not being able to talk about what's really on their mind, what is at the heart of it. We see this with kids. They're acting out this way, but it's really about this. And we really need to talk about that. And it will address their behavior. And there's so much pain and suffering that happens because people aren't talking about the reality of what's happening and they're hiding and protecting each other, but we can't really deal with what's really happening. It's like a trauma thing when we don't actually talk about we don't actually deal with it. It will just manifest itself in different ways. And the other part of it is patients and families have an understanding and appreciation for each other when we are more open about what we can do and what we can't do. So we call this knowing your style. And it comes up a lot that there's a lot of family tension sometimes about why isn't so-and-so doing this, or they really should do this, and I want them to do this, and why are they acting in this way? But if we really pay attention, this is who they are. This is how they've always been. And so instead of trying to change them, we maybe, surround them with a team that can fill in the gaps, but also appreciate that this is how they're this is how they need to go through this journey. This is how they're going to enter this journey. That's for the patient, but that's also for the family. There's this appreciation of this is how they take information in. This is their coping mechanism. So we need to not try to change that, but appreciate that, or at least respect that. But that may not be what's right for you as an outsider looking in, or another person in the crew. But yeah, it helps resolve family tensions in a way, because what we're really doing is honing in on what those things, how does that help them, and how can we support them?
Hsien, that is such valuable insight, and I'm sure it resonates with a lot of the audience. I myself also experienced that. My father passed in March this year, and he had Parkinson's. He probably lived with it for close to 20 years or more. It's often diagnosed much later than actual onset, once symptoms manifest and you can't unsee them in daily life. And what you just said, the coping mechanisms and how individuals deal with what's happening, is very much, in most cases, tied to how they've always been. And I remember to his last days, my father, who needed 24/7 medical care during the last year of his life, he would still say he doesn't need anyone. And instead of getting upset at what one could perceive as stubbornness, to just realize this is him, this has always been part of his coping mechanisms throughout life, and then just to work with it instead of being against it and having the family tensions, any kind of things that were going on for all your life between you and, let's say, the parent in this case, flow in. That is so valuable. There's something else. I'm curious if you have some insight, maybe advice for us, Hsien, and that's the following. To communicate, as you just underscored, is so important. However, there's often the situation when individuals deal with a really life-changing diagnosis, a terminal illness, or very debilitating illness, especially that's progressive. Oftentimes, I've witnessed it in a circle of my friends, from what I've heard in my own family. The individual, the patient, does not really want to talk about it. In some cases, even not letting their spouse join certain medical consultations, and the information just trickles out. And of course, that can have a lot of reasons. People may want to cling to control, that idea of control, or they don't want to worry or burden the family, a mix of that, many other reasons. How do you, as a loved one, best approach this when there is basically a stop, a lock put in front of the information flow, and it actually comes from the patient themselves?
This is really this is the number one question. And the heart of that, what you just asked, and in that version of that question comes across all of it, but really it is this tension between wanting to, I'm going to use, not deny, because I don't think people are denying, but they want to avoid, they want to make it, maybe keep it a secret, they want to protect the others, and so they don't want to talk about it. Or another version of that is, it's hoping they want to fight. They're going to fight this. They're going to leave no stone left unturned to try to come up with a cure and go for treatment. And what I have learned from watching my colleague Sammy Winemaker do this, and many other really very skilled, caring clinicians, is it's not so much a point, but it is a recognition of what you're really looking for is little entry points where you can engage in a conversation. You know what it's an invitation. What you're really doing is constantly inviting people to talk about what's on their mind. And that can come in many different ways. Someone in my family right now is quite ill, and he is talking, and he'll be like, oh, his messages will be like happy, but really they have a tinge of sadness. Like, every day is a gift, but I have very few days. And so it's true. And so there's a recognition, but there's a sadness underneath. And so what one can do is ask people what's on their mind. You can ask people like, are you the kind of person that when faced with challenges, you like to talk about things openly, or would you rather have everything sprinkled with sugar? Or are you the kind of person who likes to plan for things and be very organized and look to the future? Or are you sort of day to day? And so talking about things that are not about not talking about the illness, not talking about dying, but you're talking about themselves. Okay. And then have you noticed any changes in you? Does that worry you? So this is a great question that I've heard from people. If some people will worry about after when someone dies and what that could be like. And some people worry about from today till the end and what that's going to be like. Is that something you're worried about? And if you are, there are things that we can do. I'm here for you. And we can talk about that. And we may not have answers, but I just want you to know that talking about it doesn't scare me because it actually helps me. And I think I want to remind people that even though if the person doesn't want to talk about it, that doesn't mean you have to have the same reality. If you knew your dad had Parkinson's, but he was not wanting to use that word, you would still read everything you could about Parkinson's. You could join a Parkinson's support group for children or spouses of, so that you could be prepared. And you could start, even if they didn't want to talk about it, you could observe what changes you were seeing to know what stage they were at. For example, we don't have to, we all will deal with things in different ways, but we don't only have to go one way, and we can seek out information for ourselves, even if we aren't the patient. And so questions about their style, how they like to, if there was information that could help you plan, would you want to? And sometimes people say, no, not yet, but you just keep inviting them. They might be ready next time because now they can see there's a progression, for example, something is different. And why do you think that is? Why do you think there's been a change? Or what brings, and they'll tell you it's from they know what's in their mind and heart, and what they say are not always exactly the same thing. And I think that's okay that there's this gray area, but that doesn't mean we have to live in total and no information.
Indeed, Hsien, and I really like the concept of invitation. That's really beautiful, and that also takes the heaviness off of the idea to start a conversation when one knows that the loved one may be a little closed up toward it, and just planting these subtle seeds. To pick up another thread, or please.
One thing that you said that I think might be useful is you saying that your dad was the kind of person who didn't want any help. So, but I wondered if he's the kind of person who loved his family and his daughters. And so one way to go into that is to say, this isn't for you, Dad. This is for me. This is for us. We're bringing these people in for us because we want to make sure you're getting the best. Do you see what I'm saying? So you're just appreciating their style, that they want to be independent, but this actually bringing in help is helping them to be more independent. Actually. So this is the whole, how you use know your style to help you not drive an agenda, but to make sure that everyone's needs are met, and that we're not living in a world where we have to carry everything alone, because information, there are supports out there, and we want to tap into that when we can so that we're not suffering unnecessarily.
Exactly. And it's so true what you said. We actually used, quote unquote, my mom as in, Dad, we're bringing in the help for mom, so it's easier for her, and so forth. And sometimes I also see this in my close family where the elder adults may not implement a certain change for themselves. And then sometimes they would do it for their children. So when you know in a benign way, in a caring and loving way, which buttons to push to ensure that the loved one gets the best care and the best attention, I think that's really important to do. And of course, not wield it like a weapon, but truly use it as a means to keep the loved one safe and comfortable and as healthy within the circumstances as possible. And that, of course, also extends to the immediate family. The entire family unit will be healthier mentally, physically, and the easier this whole transition, this part of the journey can be made. With regard to, so these are overcoming some potential barriers within the families, within the circle of loved ones. On a bigger scale, from your vantage point as a researcher and also educator, what do you see as the core systemic barriers to making palliative care accessible and integrated earlier in treatment? And what cultural myths keep us collectively avoidant of these conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in a nutshell, it's that we have over medicalized the dying experience, which is a natural part of living. All living things go through different phases, including a dying phase, which can last many years. And then there's the death, which is the moment you have your last breath. And because we have, in a way, over medicalized this or made it very focused it on machines and science and technology and hospitals, we've lost the social aspect of it and the community aspect of it. And community dying used to be a community experience, where in certain countries, even today, this idea of public health palliative care still exists and is trying to make a resurgence, and where some of my research is in. But it is the idea of how communities can support one another. Families are part of that, but families don't exist in isolation. They are supported by groups. It takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to support a family and someone dying too. And so I think we've just lost some of that really in the last 50, 100 years, just because, as other guests have talked about, people used to die in their homes and have the visitation in their own homes, but now we've outsourced all of that to different places. So it's not visible. And I think to combat that, I think we just can appreciate that, that loss. One of the big things is loss, not just dying of someone we love, but loss and grief is all around us, whether it's a loss of a pet or the loss when you change schools, you lose some of your old friends and you make new ones. This is a part of life. And there's skills that children have and teens have. And I just think we need to make the connection that we are all losing things each and every day of ourselves. And of course, when we're sick, it's at a different level, our independence, our hopes for longer time. But I think we sweep that under the rug and we try to make it easy. But actually, how we deal with grief and loss in everyday life can get magnified for illness. And I just think communities have always existed, and we just need to put the attention back and our resources back into supporting our relationships with people that we love, our families, our social networks, because that is how that's how all of us should make it through an experience when we're caring for someone who's dying or when we are facing our own illness. Those networks are so important to the support that we would need.
Yes, and to take back whether it's illness or the actual dying process, to take it out of this purely medical context and bring it back into the communities where it belongs. This is how we humans are wired. It's the natural way. And I love that you said it not only takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to also accompany the dying, and including their loved ones. And when we look, you said that death has become very over medicalized. And when we look at that in many Western contexts, death is always, but it seems like it's so often treated like almost a medical failure rather than a sacred part of life. And how do you think these cultural narrative of ours around death impact not only palliative care, but the psychological and spiritual well-being of the dying and their families?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer it, but I think what we have seen in every culture in the world, people die, and there are rituals around it. There are different religious beliefs of what happens and how we should treat the body and where those souls go and that kind of thing. So it isn't that we've avoided it. I just think, and I think there's a beautiful diversity in all the different things that can happen. But collectively, we are fighting for more time. I think for that, there's a belief that always extra time is always good. And I'm not sure that's always true. And so, yeah, I'm not sure how we reclaim some of that, but I can tell you, hearing from different places around the world, they all feel the same thing, that it has become over medicalized, and they're trying to fight to bring the voice of the patient and family back at the center. So it becomes less focused on, we're not spending all our resources on extra treatment and fancy machines, although obviously if those could be helpful, we want them. We would rather spending it on helping us support people be at home and caring for their loved ones and providing the hands-on personalized care that we need. so that families can be families and not nurses and pharmacists and that kind of thing. So it's a universal experience when we've been going around the world talking about hoping for the best and plan for the rest. It really has, some of the language is a little bit different. Like in the Philippines, because it's very Christian and Catholic, they say pray for the best, but plan for the rest. And so that seems to work and open up that conversation. But, and there's lots of different other examples, but but the heart of the message is the same. There is this yearning to humanize, to put the human back at the center of the care.
Yes. And also what is so important, what you just mentioned, to ensure that the loved one, that the family can stay family and that the loved ones don't become nurses or pharmacists, etc. And you're touching upon something really important, Hsien. Often in these journeys, family caregivers carry immense emotional, physical, and also all the logistical burdens. What guidance do you offer to them? How to care for their loved one while also honoring their own well-being, their own grief, and their own humanity?
Yeah. Okay. As you're absolutely right. In a way, so much of what we're talking about is for the families and caregivers, because they survive and they are carrying the experience, and hopefully it's not a traumatic one, but carrying that experience forward. And so it's so important that they have as much information so that they're making the best decisions for their loved one and for themselves. But I know one of the biggest challenges is that people don't identify in using the word caregiver or carer. And they just are, I'm the daughter, I'm the wife, I'm the husband. And I appreciate that. And I think we don't need to only be labeled that to get support. In a way, it's like the education of, like, when someone gets sick, these are the skills that we all need to have. We need to be able to walk two roads. We need to zoom out. We need to invite ourselves and know our style and that kind of thing. And I think it's just remembering how, first of all, that caregivers are the backbone of society. They do tons and billions of dollars of unrecognized or unvalued care. And if they all were on strike one day, everything would stop, like, really. But they matter too. I think they have to remember that their feelings and emotions count too. And they're not putting themselves first, but by getting information helps themselves, but also the patient that they're caring for. And I think it is important that they know, set up realistic expectations. Part of knowing what you can handle is about how long you're being asked to do it for. And if we don't have a realistic picture of both of those things, we're not setting ourselves up for success. And it is it's okay to ask for help, or to set up a schedule, or to take moments, or to set up a plan that works so that you can be in this role while also still living the other parts of your life. But I think more and more what we're seeing is caregiving is a universal experience for people. There are so few people that we meet who are never going to either to be a caregiver, for sure, but they definitely will know one. And of course, will probably need one. And I think we, as a society, as a world, can pay more attention on not just how to support them, but how to train ourselves to be more equipped to know what to do when we're faced with this role.
Yes. And being prepared and having the information you need prior to something potentially happening within your circle of loved ones, but then also when you are faced with a specific diagnosis of a loved one, that can really empower you and make sure that you also take care of yourself well enough. I had the opportunity only for a few weeks to take care of both of my parents, because my mom was the main caregiver for a point for my dad. Injured herself, and thank goodness I was in Germany at the time. And I realized how it's so easy to basically allow yourself to get sucked into the circle where you're just running, doing, and then you collapse at nighttime in the bed, and you do this same thing the next day, and you just put yourself aside so much that you're actually starting to hurt yourself, and then you can not care for those you love as much. And getting the information, how long may this take? What are the other options? How do I schedule it so I also have time to recharge a little bit myself, to not constantly be on day and night? We then got in care, which was great and should have been done much earlier, how a lot of wonderful mothers are. Our mom never let us know that, to which point it actually had gotten until we witnessed it with our own eyes. This is so important. And I think it's also important to realize that one does not have to feel guilty about asking these questions, about feeling what are my own limits. Certain
Yes.
people are more capable of, for long stretches of time, taking psychological and or physical care of someone, when other people may burn out quicker and they may have capacities for other things. So find out what that is. I think that's
And to revisit this, where you started from, things change. And so we encourage patients and caregivers to have frank and open conversations about their needs, their understanding. This is why the big picture and a shared walking two roads is important, but you can revisit it, because especially over long periods of time, your capabilities change, your new roles come up. And I think it's okay to not just, you're talking about setting limits and boundaries, which is a hard thing to do, but in a way, that's why we encourage patients to understand, how do I say, to give permission to say, you know what, even though I wish you were doing this, I understand that you can't do it all the time. So what's a reasonable way that we can manage this so that you're not going to burn out? I think if a patient, that's such a powerful thing to give permission to your caregiver, because you might have talked about it once a long time ago, and that's what they're holding on to. But people change, their condition changes, needs change. And so I think just like anything, we should revisit it and make sure that one name is not on every single role, because that's a big red flag for this is where community and other family comes in to help. And not to say, hey, call me when you need help, but actually step forward and say, I'm going to do this for you every week or every month. I'm going to take on this task because, that I'm good at it. I like doing it. It's not a burden to me, and it probably might help you because you can't do all things.
Oh, 100%. And it could be simple things like somebody enjoys how to cook. This is what I'm going to do once or twice a week. I'm going to deliver the meals, lunch and the dinner. Or somebody may find it meditative to iron clothes. What it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Or walking their dog or taking care of their lawn. This is why when you asked at the very beginning about what is palliative care, see, to me, palliative care at the heart is about love. It is doing those things, doing those actions and stepping up for using your skills, your gifts to help others, even just to listen, just to be there and listen so that person can step out or take a nap, go get groceries, is a gift. And that is a form of palliative care. That is helping the people live their best life. And so it doesn't have to be medical. And so I think if we really think about what palliative care is, it's just supporting people in any way, shape, or form when they face any kind of illness.
Beautiful, Hsien. Something that also crossed my mind was, when we look at the richness of this world, across cultures, dying has often been seen not just a medical, but as also a deeply spiritual threshold. And I'm curious, in your work, have you observed how spiritual perspective, whether religious or personal, have shaped the way people approach their illness journey at the end of their lives?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We don't touch on that a lot in my research, but obviously we've met thousands of patients, Sammy and I, in our work, and people hold lots of diverse religious beliefs. Even within a religion, there's variation in what people believe and what practices they follow and don't. And I think at the end of the day, my gut is that everyone believes something, even if that something is, I don't believe in anything. They all believe in something, and that should be honored and respected. And so when we talk about, one of our keys is customize your order, we talk about doing your best to declare what is important to you, who you are, what is important to you, what are your values. And some of those values may connect to religion and spirituality, but some of them may not. They might deal with nature or your pets or your children, which is not connected directly to spiritual beliefs, or culture. So I think we recognize that every person is unique, and we really implore them in one of our keys we call customize your order to bring that forward if that is important to you, and if that is something that's going to shape decision making, or you think is a value that is important for someone to know about you as you that you use to make decisions, then you should bring that forward. But it isn't always important to the same extent for every person. And in a way, people will tell us what's important to them, whether it's their gender, their, or whatever parts of their life they want to talk about that is just critical to them and how they view the world. That is important for your medical teams to know and for your inner crew to know, because, they want to respect and support you, and they need to know where you're going in a way. So I don't think it's only about religion and spirituality, of course, although of course that's a big piece of it. But I think in terms of everybody's unique and where they put their value. And I think as much as we wish the system would just know and invest the time to learn about it, they have no time to do that. So the counterweight to that is you bring it forward. This is a question that Dr. Harvey Chachanoff has asked. It's the patient dignity question. What do I need to know about you as a clinician to give you the best care possible? And they've been training clinicians all over the world to ask this. But in my head, I'm like, we can also tell patients and families just to bring forward and say, this is what you need to know about me to give me the best care possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did it this morning. My daughter's a little shy. She's at summer camp. And so I told the counselor, I'm like, you need to know that my daughter's a little shy and she's lovely and she'll warm up, but she might need a little help making friends. We do this all the time. So with our medical teams, with our communities, let's give them a leg up and just say, these are the things that you need to know about me that are really important as I face this challenge in my life, or this last chapter, or these last chapters. These are my North Stars that if we can hold on to this, it's going to be so much more a better experience for me, but also for you, because you're honoring what's important to me.
Oh gosh, yes, 100%. And aside from sharing this with your medical team and caretakers, I believe also, while we're doing well and while illness and death is not on the horizon for us yet, to actually talk about this. I have voiced many times with loved ones, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, make sure this and that happens in case. And even though it might not necessarily feel great for a lot of people to touch upon these topics, it is so important because it's going to make it so much easier on everyone. And you've been in touch with and close proximity with mortality every day due to your work, Hsien, and from all you've witnessed and all you've held, I would love to learn from you. What has death taught you about life, about what truly matters in the end, or maybe what doesn't matter at all?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think what losing my mom at an early age and doing this work, time is a gift. We all have a certain amount of time on this earth, and it's short. And we should, I think, to be happiest, we should try to live our life to the fullest if we can. And I think that means tapping into your purpose. Mine happens to be in healthcare, but not everybody's is. And I think the more true we are to our purpose in our work, the more happy we'll be, the more we're feeling. But we all, no matter how rich or poor or where you're born or where you live or how you live, at the end of the day, yeah, unifying us is time, that we have a certain amount of time. And what we've heard over and over is people don't care about the material. It's about their relationships and it's love. When people are facing their last chapter, they just want to spend more time with people they love. And so it's about counting those moments and trying to not get swept up in all the game, the rat race, but to try to really just hone in on what makes you happy and invest in the relationships that you care about. And that doesn't require money to do that. It's the act. Love is an action. And so, yeah, I try to think about that as much as I can, about your purpose and making sure you're letting people know how much they mean to you, while you, not only in the last weeks and days, but every single day.
Yes, indeed, Hsien. And one more question. Since your life has been focused on pretty much one of the most intense experiences we can have, which is the process of dying. If you could sit across from your younger self before this journey began and share one insight, one piece of wisdom you now carry, what would you tell young Hsien?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know. I've never been asked that. I think even though our journey with my mom was 4 years, but in a way she was preparing us for a world where she may not exist. And she would say things like, if I'm ever gone, I want you to make sure you have a good relationship with your dad. So that was important to her. And she always said that. And that was her sort of her one wish or request. And so we honored that. But in a way, because she was preparing me in a way like doing what do we call it? Preparatory grief or anticipatory grief. I feel like when she left, like it was incredibly sad and life changing, but I was not shocked by it in a way. I had imagined a world. So what would I tell my younger self? I think you just continue to, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I try to continue to be a good person and to live your purpose. And if you do that, you will you won't ever feel lost, I think. And in a way, I think I felt true to that for the most part. And I think you're never too young to start thinking about what your purpose is, what your skills are, because I think life is trying to tell you in a whisper where you should use your talents and what you're here for. Maybe I'm getting a bit spiritual, but I think, or what brings you joy, you can think of it that way. And I think we want to pay attention to that because it'll keep repeating itself in these patterns until we learn it, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I know those patterns well, Hsien, and that is truly beautiful. And it is very obvious you are someone who is deeply, deeply rooted in purpose. And looking forward, what is your greatest hope for how palliative care could evolve in the coming decades?
Oh, thank you for that question. Yeah. When Sammy and I started the waiting room revolution, we called it, we really envisioned it as a social movement because we realized, these ideas, it's a humongous cultural problem. It's a cultural innovation that we're trying to generate. And that can't come from writing a book or a podcast. And we have a book and we have a workbook that helps people with exercises. But what we really need are patients and families coming to the system with a new vibe, more activated and realizing that they can ask these questions armed with way and with knowledge of how they can interact with this complex system. And so we have an ambassador program where we're really giving away materials for workshops that people all around the world can download these free materials from our website to lead their own workshops so they can teach others how to be activated patients and families with our 7 keys as the guide, but to incorporate it and adapt it into their own local communities, cultures, situations, and contexts so that it resonates with their audience. That's how we'll shift the needle, change the story, is if millions of people are teaching others and sharing the tips that work for them, not medical information, but how to interact with the system. And so that's our waiting room revolution that we really hope is a revolution. In a way, it is a palliative care revolution, but we needed the right language. And so the waiting room revolution metaphor came about because the waiting room is really a scary place for many people where they feel powerless and helpless. But with the right information and the right questions and knowledge and attitude, they can reclaim that power. And the waiting room can be a place where they're in charge. And really, the medical team is joining the patient family team. They're there to support you, not the other way around. And so they need to know how best to care for you, not just medically, but socially, emotionally. And we can help. All of us have the power to help share that information, to guide them, train them into what we need from them and from others beyond the medical system, of course, so that we can we can live our best life.
Yes, indeed, because it's not just about dying, it's about
Living.
to and deep gratitude to you for the amazing work that has so much heart and is rooted in so much love that you are putting forth, Hsien. And as we bring this conversation to a close, I invite you, dear listeners, to sit with what Dr. Seow shared today. And may we remember that hope and realism are not opposing forces, but two wings that help us navigate the unknown. And may we find courage to ask the questions that matter, to speak the truths we carry in our hearts, and to align our choices with what we value most. Because even in the face of life's greatest challenges, there is a power that remains, the power to choose how we show up, to choose presence, choose love, to choose meaning right until the very last breath. Thank you, Dr. Seow, for reminding us that though we cannot always change what is happening to us, we can transform how we experience it. And to each of you listening, may you carry this wisdom forward into your life, your care and your love for yourself and others. Thank you for joining us today.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.